I'm not going to mince words today. That was a disgraceful performance by the New York Jets. The Jets fall to the Broncos. Let's break down the debacle today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, September 30th, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Well, I wish you a happy Monday, but I know for Jets fans, it is not a happy Monday as the Jets inexplicably fell to the Denver Broncos yesterday at MetLife Stadium, 10-9 on a rainy and windy day. But you can't blame the weather. The coach tried to blame the weather, but you can't blame the weather. This was an utter disgrace. I said that, I remember saying this 2 weeks ago when the Jets played a pretty unremarkable game against the Tennessee Titans, that there were essentially three paths the game could go. There would be the path where the Jets blew out their opponent and you're feeling really good about these things. And, especially after that performance in week 3 against New England, the Jets were riding high, and another dominant performance against the Denver Broncos. They'd be 3-1. They'd be, hitting their stride right as the schedule starts to get to a tougher point. You can feel like this is a team that could be going places, because that's how it felt 10 days ago. 10 days ago, it felt like this was a team that's going places. There could be an unremarkable win, which frankly, through most of the game, up until Greg Zuerlein tried to, kick that ball, I actually thought this was I still thought the Jets were going to win. But an underwhelming performance, which you'd say, there's still a lot to work on. There are some things to be worried about. A loss would be a disaster. And this loss is a disaster. And the thing about the NFL is you have to prove yourself every single week, because the narrative can change very quickly. 10 days ago, we were talking about the Jets, how good they looked. And yeah, maybe it was a bad opponent against the Patriots. But as much as winning the game matters, I think for this Jets team, the level they play at matters, because this is a new team, lots of new pieces. We still don't know exactly how good they are. So the question is, how high of a level are they going to perform at? The New England Patriots are not going to tell you whether or not the Jets can beat the Kansas City Chiefs or the Baltimore Ravens or the Buffalo Bills. But dominating the Patriots shows you, if the Jets play at that level, they'll be competitive against those teams. And losing to the Denver Broncos shows that they're not even close to that level. We talked about on Friday how this game was a test of maturity, because one of the most important things about, if you want to be a top tier team in this league, is bringing it consistently from week to week. Even the weeks where you may have an excuse to look past your opponent. Because in the NFL, if you look past your opponent, you're in trouble. And at the NFL, if you don't take your preparation seriously, you're in trouble. And I don't know how you can look at that game, that performance, that disgrace. Let's use that word again, disgrace, because this team should be embarrassed. You cannot shame this team enough today based on the way they played. Utterly embarrassing. You should be embarrassed. That those players should all be embarrassed, outside of a handful of guys like Mike Williams and DJ Reed who played well. You can't watch that game and tell me that team took its preparation week seriously. Now, the head coach tried to tell you that after the game. The head coach told you we had a great week of practice. I don't know what it is about this Jets team that makes every single coach, after debacles like this, claim they had a great week of practice. You didn't have a great week of practice. Your team wasn't ready to play. The team clearly read its headlines this week. The team clearly basked in the domination of New England and did not take this game seriously. How can you say that this team took this game seriously when you have 13 penalties? And these aren't, these aren't penalties that are disputable. Maybe a couple of them are. 5 false starts. Twice, one of your defenders lines up in the neutral zone. This is just horribly undisciplined football. And after the game, Robert Saleh tells us, well, it was raining. We knew it was going to be tough in the rain. Look, you can blame the rain for issues handling the ball. You can blame the rain maybe for some of the throws Rodgers missed, because certainly, Bo Nix had issues throwing the ball. The other quarterback had issues throwing the ball as well in the rain. You can blame it maybe for Garrett Wilson fumbling the ball. You can't blame the rain for guys false starting. You can't blame the rain for guys, going in the neutral zone. I mean, this is even there's no excuse for this. How does the rain make it more likely that your guys jump early? And well, Robert Saleh had an excuse for that. He talked about the cadences, about how maybe we need to scale back the cadences. And even Aaron Rodgers after the game, when he heard that, he said, well, you can scale back the cadences, or you can also hold guys accountable. And this is the issue with this coaching staff. Robert Saleh never wants to hold anybody accountable, Because I don't see how you can listen to hear him talk after the game and think that he's doing anything other than making excuses for a horrible, horrible performance. And probably because he knew he did not have this team ready. Because this team clearly spent its week basking in the glow of the Patriots game, reading its headlines, thinking it was better than it really was. And they went out and lost to a Denver team that had negative passing yards in the first half. How do you face a team, allow negative passing yards in the first half and lose the game? Incredible. This Denver team is not any good. And I'm sorry. The defense, showed some things. Like the defense has a couple players. They're well coached. The Jets offense is not well coached. I think we all know that at this point. And I think we know that Nathaniel Hackett is a big problem. And I think any hope that Aaron Rodgers would paper over the Nathaniel Hackett issue, those are long gone. This offense can't function unless Aaron Rodgers looks like the Green Bay MVP version of Aaron Rodgers. And we've only seen that once. We've seen that in the New England game. And then you see like little flashes within the game. Like there's a play here or there where Rodgers looks like his old self. But look, Rodgers is 40. He's not going to play at that level every single week. It's just not going to happen. And the Jets are going to have issues on offense because this offense is horribly schemed. And, there's the one sequence that everybody's talking about is the sequence the Jets had the ball on the goal line, in the first half. And rightly so, because I feel like this sequence, every bad Jets coach and GM through the years, they have like that one thing that kind of like it's the one moment or one decision that summarizes an entire era. It was the Frank Gore wheel route with Adam Gase, which also came against the Broncos at MetLife Stadium. Remember that wheel route Gase ran with Frank Gore? 2 years of awful football, but if you were asking for like that one signature moment, it was the Frank Gore wheel route. John Idzik, it was signing Dimitri Patterson, the guy who, Idzik ignores the corner position. He brings in this journeyman, mediocre veteran, and the guy quits on the team. Mike McCagnon drafting Christian Hackenberg. 5 years of futility with McCagnon that can be explained by a quarterback drafted in the second round who never plays an NFL snap. The Solomon Thomas play on the goal line. That is, that is peak Nathaniel Hackett. Jets fans, let me ask you a question. If you have the ball on the 1 yard line, let me give you two options. One is give the ball to your power back, Braylon Allen, 235 pounds, tough to bring down. He leans forward, he's going to get a yard. Or put in your backup defensive tackle and call a pass play where he's the primary option. Which of those two do you think is more likely to score a touchdown? Well, unless you're Nathaniel Hackett, I think you're going to say give the ball to Braylon Allen. But Nathaniel Hackett thinks let's target Solomon Thomas. That's the ticket to getting 1 yard on the goal line. I mean, if you ever wanted to sum up Nathaniel Hackett's tenure with the Jets, I don't think you could do better than that. And it speaks to the lack of preparation. It speaks to just ignoring obvious things. I'm going to say something else. I'm the biggest Breece. You listen to my podcast going back to the day the Jets drafted Breece Hall. I don't think there's a bigger Breece Hall fan in the world. I've praised Breece Hall nonstop the last 2 years. But if you're watching this team right now, it's clear Braylon Allen's the more effective runner. That may not be true in a month. That may not be true in 2 months. It may not be true in 2 weeks. But right now, Braylon Allen's the better back. He should be getting more of the carries. It was obvious halfway through the first quarter that Breece Hall was having the worst game of his career. It was obvious that Breece, for whatever reason, he had a couple false starts, drops. He couldn't even get to the line of scrimmage. Breece was having a rough game. Allen was running the ball effectively. Yet Breece was the featured back still. What's going on there? Especially on the goal line twice before the brilliant Solomon Thomas play call. Breece got the ball twice on the goal line. Breece is a big back, but he's not a guy who's going to be as adept at lowering his shoulder and grinding out the tough yards as Braylon Allen is. That's just like the obvious example of something that's obvious at all to everybody. This Jets coaching staff is miserable. This Jets coaching staff is holding this team back. But that's not the only issue with the team. I had you on the Locked On Jets podcast. I'm sorry to continue to talk about the negativity, but there's nothing else you can do when the Jets lose a game like that. I have some concerns that this game exposed some other issues with the Jets, and we'll talk about what those issues are continuing here on this Monday game recap edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. You should know Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Gametime filters out the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I don't just talk about Gametime on the show. I use Gametime. I love it. A couple of times I've been with family members. I wanted to go see something, and I just pulled out my phone maybe an hour or two before the event. I still can't believe some of the deals I've got. I've got amazing seats at very low prices. The other thing that's great about Gametime is there's no surprise when you arrive at your venue. you can see the view from your seat. They have a picture of what your seat's going to look like. So there's no surprise, no obstructed views. I actually had an experience a few weeks back. I did not use Gametime, and I had an unexpected obstructed view on a ticket that I bought. That wouldn't have happened if I had used Gametime. So don't make the same mistake I made. Make sure you're using Gametime to buy your last-minute tickets. Take the guesswork out of my tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL is LOCKEDONNFL, one word with no space, for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. A very unhappy show today is that we recap the Jets losing to the Denver Broncos 10-9. The Jets fall to 2-2 on the season, squander an enormous opportunity. I mean, when the schedule came out, I think we all saw the early part of the schedule as an opportunity for the Jets to bank wins, to build some momentum, to announce to the league that we're a contender. And I think through the first 4 games, you can say that has not happened. Now, in fairness, I think we thought the first 5 weeks would be a little bit, would be that easy stretch, because Minnesota at the start of the season looked like they were going to be playing they were going to be playing a rookie quarterback, if not our old friend Sam Darnold. Of course, Minnesota is now outpacing all expectations. So this week 5 game in London is going to be really tough. And that made this game even more essential to win, because the schedule starts to get tougher next week. So you wanted to go in 3-1. Now the Jets are in some real trouble right now. There are the losses where you just bounce back. You say, okay, not our week. We'll get them next time. Those happen during the season. Every team has games that, things just don't go your way. And then there are the losses that expose some pretty glaring flaws in your team. And I have to say, I'm concerned. I know it's only week 4. There is time to bounce back. We'll talk about how the Jets can bounce back a little bit later on the show. But I think the Jets have, through the early part of the season, shown some issues that are not super fixable, or may not be super fixable. And I think you have to start at the coaching staff. I mean, everybody's crushing the coaching. And look, the coaching is the first place everybody always goes to when the team loses, because they're it's the low-hanging fruit. You don't know, you can always blame the coaches when things go bad. You don't need to go into deep level of analysis. And frequently the criticism's unfair. I don't think it's unfair in this case. I think everything I worried about this coaching staff came to the forefront in yesterday's game. Robert Saleh not getting the team ready, Nathaniel Hackett having lousy game plans, and Aaron Rodgers, still not a bad quarterback, but probably maybe not playing at the Green Bay Aaron Rodgers level where you can overcome Nathaniel Hackett. This was everything I worried about heading into the season with this coaching staff, about them letting this team feel too good about itself, this team not preparing. That team did not look ready to play. I mean, I don't see how you can have that many penalties. And again, you can debate a couple of them. Like, you wanted to debate the Lazard, unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, fine. But most of these penalties were objective. They were either false starts or Will McDonald lining up twice in the neutral zone. Guys just weren't ready to play. And that's a sign, again, that's a sign to me in the preparation. The coaching staff did not get this team to take its preparation seriously, because just so much undisciplined stuff. So many instances where it was, you just saw that the team was not ready to play. And Nathaniel Hackett, I mean, yeah, I understand you can go crazy about one play call, but that just that sequence on the goal line, that tells you everything you need to know about Nathaniel Hackett. Coaches are frequently judged on results more than they are process, and that's not always fair. Look, if that play had scored a touchdown, if the Broncos had forgotten to cover Solomon Thomas and he catches a touchdown, people are probably talking about what a brilliant call it is, but it wouldn't have been a brilliant call, because what I judge the coaches on are, did you put the team in a position where you've given them the highest odds of success? And there's no way you can tell me in a goal line sequence that you have a higher odds of success trying to throw the ball to Solomon Thomas than you do giving the ball to Braylon Allen. Which of these two is more likely to result in a touchdown? I think the answer to that's pretty obvious. And you can extrapolate that. That's one play. But it's just true of the entire Jets offense, where Hackett's not putting this team in the highest percentage odds to have success. Like, Garrett Wilson's a good example. Everybody's crushing Garrett Wilson today. Bad fumble. But we knew going in, we talked about this last week, how Patrick Surtain is a tough matchup for Garrett Wilson. This is a guy who's struggled against in the past. And I love Garrett Wilson, but I think people need to put to bed this idea that Garrett Wilson is going to be, a 1,600-yard receiver, that Garrett Wilson's a top 5 receiver, that, now with Aaron Rodgers here, he's going to have prime Devontae Adams level results. Garrett's a good receiver. Garrett's a real asset to this team. He's not that type of guy. Against a corner like Patrick Surtain, the coordinator's got to help him out. The coordinator's got to help create traffic to create separation. Use your formations, use your route combinations to create traffic and try and spring Garrett. There was one play where he ran a little short, shallow drag route on a bootleg. There was one play that was a quick screen, which I think it may have been a Rodgers call, not a Hackett call. Hackett did nothing to help him out. And I think there are other problems here. I mean, I think, the run defense. Look, you can praise the defense for only allowing 10 points, but I got to be honest with you, the way Bo Nix was throwing the ball, I don't know how much credit you can really give the defense. It was going to be very difficult for Denver to score many points with the way with Bo Nix struggling to put the ball within 5 yards of any of his targets for most of the game. The way Denver was playing, the only way Denver could score, one of three things had to happen. Either the Jets had to have an enormous bust in an assignment, either the Broncos just had to physically maul the Jets up front in the run game, or there needed to be like a real lucky bounce on a play that went Denver's way that turned into a big play. Well, two of those three things happened. On the Denver touchdown, the Jets busted their coverage. The bigger issue, and we've seen this through at various points through the early part of the season, I thought the Jets had a really rough time in the run game in the second half. Sean Payton adjusted, which Nathaniel Hackett's never going to adjust. Sean Payton adjusted at halftime. He just said, we're leaning on the run game now. Our quarterback can't throw it. We're just going to pound the football. Broncos finished with 126 yards on a 4.1 average with no viable passing game. This Jets run defense is an issue. I'm sorry. Like last week against New England was encouraging. Well, anything encouraging that happened in that game is now out the window. Jets for, 2.5 of the 4 games have looked very susceptible to the run. And I don't know how you fix that. I think that's going to be really tough to fix. The other issue, like the offensive side of the ball, this is something that really leaves me concerned. Is first of all, this offense can't do anything unless Rodgers looks like prime Green Bay Rodgers. And there are moments where you see flashes of prime Green Bay Rodgers. There are some throws he makes where it's like, wow, he's still got something there. But he's not doing it through the course of the game. You can also see there are a lot of points where he doesn't still look like prime Green Bay Rodgers. And at 40 years old, that's probably who he's going to be. You'll still see those flickers of the old guy he used to be. There might even be a game or two, like the New England game, where he looks like the vintage Aaron Rodgers. But at 40 years old, it's just too much to ask. You need the other pieces to help him up. You need the other pieces to help him out. And that part of that's you need the coaching to put the team in better place. You can't be in a situation where the quarterback has to bail out the offensive coordinator on every play. Rodgers is just not at that point of his career. He's still a viable starter, but he's not like the top 3 quarterback anymore. And I don't think it's fair to ask him at 40 years old, off an Achilles injury, to be that top 3 quarterback. I think an even bigger issue is the fact he got injured in this game. He was clearly playing hurt that last series. He took a big hit the second to last series on the 4th down play, and he was hobbling. And Rodgers wasn't moving around great before then, but he was moving around effectively enough to extend plays. And you can even tell, like, he's nowhere near as fast as he was in Green Bay. I mean, there were a couple plays where he was running around back there where he checked it down. And I remember saying to myself, in Green Bay, he probably breaks out to the pocket and throws a 20-yard strike and, it hits a big play on that. You could tell he's not the same guy, but he at least was able to move around somewhat efficiently. He's kind of slippery. He was able to break some tackles. He was able to find the soft spots in the pocket like Tom Brady used to do so effectively. But what concerned me about this game is, first of all, is he going to be 100% for this week? But the second issue is this was the first time he took a lot of hits. He took 14 hits. Denver had 5 sacks, and he did not survive the game unscathed. And I think when you're dealing with a 40-year-old, we know that guys who are later in their career, it's tougher for the body to recover. The body doesn't absorb hits as efficiently as it used to when you're at that age. And for him the first time he takes a pounding, he doesn't come away unscathed. I mean, is this just the guy is this going to be an issue going forward? If the Jets offensive line has a bad game, is Rodgers going to be able to hold up? I think these are real concerns for this team, and hopefully, they have a resolution. Of course, the season's not over yet. The Jets are still 2-2. A big game awaits for them next weekend in London. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about the path forward for the Jets. This is not necessarily a season-ending loss. I don't think you can dismiss the concerns, but there is a path to recovery for this team. We'll talk about what it is continuing here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Jets are heading to London this weekend to face the Minnesota Vikings, the undefeated Minnesota Vikings, quarterbacked by our old friend Sam Darnold, who seems to be having a breakout season. The Jets, after that performance against Denver, not surprisingly, begin as 2.5-point underdogs to the Vikings heading into London. Well, if you think the Jets are going to turn it around, FanDuel's the place to go because, again, $5 gets you $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Just go to FanDuel.com. Again, it's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Monday. The Jets fall to the Denver Broncos. I mean, inexplicably, the Broncos beat the Jets 10-9. Jets throw away a golden opportunity to start 3-1. I mean, I don't think there's any other way you can put it. This schedule lined up so well for the Jets at the start of the season, and anything short of 3-1 at this point was going to be a letdown, especially losing a game like that. Because how many times at the end of the season do you look back and you've missed the playoffs by a game or you lose the division by a game, and there was an opportunity somewhere along the way that you let slip away? And there's a chance we'll look back on that game because there's no earthly reason the Jets should have lost to the Denver Broncos in that game. Denver's not that good, and they couldn't throw the ball, and somehow the Jets found a way to pull defeat from the jaws of victory. Denver tried to give the Jets the game. I mean, how many awful decisions did Sean Payton make in this game? Cost himself a challenge, which loomed large. He made an inexplicable challenge in the first half on a catch, and that loomed large because he was without a challenge in the fourth quarter when Aaron Rodgers fumbled and they called him down by contact. I mean, if Payton had a challenge, Denver would have gotten the ball back in great field position late in the fourth quarter. They probably would have run out the clock. Payton also inexplicably tried a long field goal late in the fourth quarter. Denver tried to hand this game to the Jets. Jets just wouldn't take it. And now the Jets are 2-2. And I thought for this team, it was really important to bank those early wins. I thought it was important to get off to a good start, to play at a really high level. Well, it hasn't happened. And I think if we're being objective about this, through 4 games, the Jets have lived up to their promise once. And I think at this point, you have to question, is this team actually as good as we thought it would be before the start of the season? Because the only game the Jets dominated was against the Patriots team that just, frankly, isn't that good. And it's funny how one bad game can change your perspective even about things that came before it. Because last week, I know the Patriots weren't very good, but I loved the level the Jets played at. And I said, you know what, maybe that's the start of something. Maybe that's the start of the Jets starting to look like a real contender. Even against a bad opponent, the Jets played at a super high level. I said, okay, this is the point where this team's launching. Well, maybe not. And maybe we look back on that game now as perhaps a reflection of the Jets just beating up on a really bad team. It's tough to say these things, but through 4 of the season, I don't think you can say the Jets are a team that looks like a Super Bowl team. I think you look at it and see the Jets as a team with a collection of big names, but maybe not a team that looks like it's very dangerous. And I think we've reached a critical point in the season. Some losses don't matter that much. Like I said, there's some losses you just shake off and you say, we'll get them next week. In many ways, week 1 was kind of like that. I did that show after the Jets lost to the 49ers, and I said, you know what, it was one game. We were expecting them to lose anyway. You would have liked to have seen them play better, but you know what? Things are looking favorable ahead. I don't think you can do that after this loss. The Jets now face a Minnesota team that's surprising everybody, with a quarterback who's surprising everybody, our old friend Sam Darnold. After that, the Jets get Buffalo. After that, they get Pittsburgh. This team's performance level is going to have to improve. And, of course, at any point in the season, there are going to be peaks and valleys. And there are even some really bad losses. There are some losses that look like microcosms of bigger issues for your team, and then your team figures them out and bounces back. It's tough to say this early in the season because, October begins tomorrow. But sometimes a season goes off the rails in October. Sometimes early on, you put yourself behind the 8 ball and you never recover. And the Jets are in danger of that right now because it's not hard to see a scenario where this team, based on the way they've played so far, 2-2, and frankly, in some ways, they were lucky to beat Tennessee. This team could very easily be 1-3 right now, based on its overall quality of play. And now they're facing tougher opponents. And you can say, well, the Jets a couple plays here or there, they would have beaten Denver yesterday. And that's true. But you know what? The level it takes to beat the Denver Broncos is very different from the level it's going to take to beat Minnesota and Buffalo and even Pittsburgh. Now, there is also an opportunity for the Jets to turn things around. This team, the season's not over by any means at 2-2. And maybe the Jets catch Minnesota on an off week next week. Maybe, the travel to London doesn't agree with Minnesota. Maybe Sam starts to revert to the quarterback he's been through most of his career. Then you got a home game against Buffalo, Monday Night Football. The crowd will be energized there. If the Jets can step up in weight class in the next couple of weeks, they have a chance to turn this around. And then if you beat a couple of teams that are in the top level of the NFL, you can start to say, all right, maybe we've hit our stride. Lots of new pieces in the early part of the season. Teams still hadn't come together yet. there's a chance for the Jets to turn this around. But I think you have to be alarmed right now because this season's like kind of teetering. It could go either way. Big performance next week against Minnesota. Maybe you catch the Vikings, on a bad week. Maybe the long trip plays some havoc on them. That's, we could be having a very different discussion in 7 days. But my concern is that you see the deficiencies on this team, the coaching, first and foremost. I mean, look, everybody's crushing the coaching. Everybody always crushes the coaching. This is an instance where I think it's actually right to crush the coaching because this coaching is clearly it's clearly a big issue with this team right now. The run defense. I mean, can the Jets stop the run at all? We know they can because they did the second half against Tennessee and New England, but I thought that was I don't think the stats do justice to how bad that run defense performance was because the other team had no viable threat to throw the ball. So the Jets could have sold out against the run, and they still couldn't get stops when they needed to against Denver. And then the issues on offense, Hackett again. I guess it's kind of coaching, but like this offense is terribly schemed, and I don't know if Rodgers has enough at this point to overcome the other issues this team has. I mean, offensive line did not look good in this game. Tyron Smith's becoming an issue. I think this is three bad games in 4 games for Tyron Smith. He looked great against Tennessee. The other 3 games, he's looked very shaky. And I think you also have to say Rodgers not having chemistry with the receivers. I think part of the issue with Garrett Wilson is that they're clearly not on the same page right now. Rodgers has chemistry with Lazard, and he's maybe starting to develop a little bit with Mike Williams, but this offense is just not on the same page right now. And, it may be a long season, but the Jets need to get this thing going right now because the Jets are a couple of weeks away from really being in a tough spot, and they're facing some really tough opponents. This might be the early point where we look back on and say this season went one of 2 ways. Either the Jets turn it around in the next couple of weeks and they propel themselves on the way to a successful season, or this is the point where the season, this may have been maybe the point of no return. It's up to the Jets. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Try and enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.